But
Yes.
to meet someone from that has come from Houston to Paris, I mean, that is just absolutely wonderful. So how's Paris?
Today in Paris, it's actually kind of cloudy, a little bit of rain, but it's a nice fall day, if you will.
I know you don't miss this Houston heat, correct?
Not at all.
Wow. Well, hey, I'm so thankful that you gave us a minute of your time, and I just wanted to read off some of your accomplishments. Uh, I mean, you're very accomplished. I just couldn't believe all the accolades that you've received. You're a United States delegate for Culinary Creole World. You are also rated 5 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. Outstanding Woman of the Year in Research and Tourism 2017 and 2020. You also teach your own, you've been a founder of your own business, Entree to Black Paris.
Hmm.
I mean, wow. I mean, let me take you back. I guess you've been in Paris for 28 years, correct?
30 years.
30 years. Wow. So okay,
Hmm.
so we got to go back to 2005, somewhere around there.
I came here in 1992.
19. Whoa, my goodness. So what? You're in Houston, Texas. You know, heart of the South.
Hmm.
What is going through your mind that would actually have you even think or decide to move to Paris?
Well, so the story does start in Houston. I was quite young when I was exposed to the French language, and I thought it was musical, and I wanted to speak that way. And I studied French all through elementary school and junior high and high school, and I got a minor in French in college. And I actually thought, well, I shouldn't say that I thought, I got excellent grades in
Okay.
French all through school. But when I set out to organize my first trip to France, to Paris in particular, and I started calling hotels to make reservations, I couldn't do it. It was a dismal failure.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, these people have lied to you. They've said that you've excelled in French. You've been studying this all your life, and you can't make a simple hotel reservation. But I realized that you know there's such a thing as academic achievement, and then there's real life. Just being in it. And I vowed that I would go to a place to live so that I could immerse myself in the language and be able to speak fluently. Um, and so then I just said, well, I'm going to make it my business to find work in my field so that I can live in a French speaking country, have gainful employment, and fulfill this dream of being able to speak fluently in French. And it took me a couple of years, but I found a position with a drug company at the time it was called Rhone Poulenc Rohrer. They brought me over. They paid all of my expenses, everything. They found me. Um, they hired a relocation service so that I had assistance in finding an apartment and getting all of my utilities connected and all of that stuff. And the rest is history. I moved here in June of 1992, and I've been here ever since.
You know what? I just brings me back to going to Paris, which was a lifelong dream for me. And
Hmm.
my uncle, he was in London, but he would go back and forth to Paris. And I asked him, I said, "Well, what do I have to do in Paris?" He's like, "Look, you're gonna have to try." And I say, "Try what?" He said, "You're gonna have to try and speak that language." He said, "They're not gonna expect you to be absolutely fluent, but if you
Hmm.
don't try, they're just gonna sit up there and look at you like, you know what, we're gonna wait on you." And so I got a few words together and we went to the hotel and the woman kind of laughed, but she was like, "You know what? she spoke English, so she helped us out. So you make that, that transition. I mean, did at any point did you have any regret, or was it? I mean, was it something about America that you felt like, what, it didn't suit you, or it was just time to make a transition? What was it?
No, it was nothing like that. I wasn't leaving the United States. I was going toward something. I was going toward an opportunity to perfect this language skill that I had been honing all my life, but I didn't realize until I was trying to make these phone calls that you must immerse yourself. And there are so many different circumstances under which you use a language. So you're speaking to someone face to face. That's one way. You're listening to it on the radio or watching television. That's another way. You're in the theater. That's another way. Um, you could be in a one-on-one situation, or you could be in a situation where there are hundreds of people and there's a lot of background noise. All of those different situations will determine how well or how poorly you are able to communicate.
Right,
And the phone is a totally different thing. I mean, so things that you could understand when you are looking at someone, you can't understand when you're on the phone
right.
because there's just something different about the acoustics and whatnot. And so, in order to deal with all of that, you have to be in a place where the language is just there. You're immersed in it, and you're constantly being faced with all of these different situations, day after day after day. It's the only way that you will ever become fluent in a language.
And that's the funny thing, that we think that because we've accomplished academically, we can take what we read in a book or take what we learned in class, and just it automatically transfers from one environment to the next. So, you're I'm sure you had a lot of trial and error making
Mhm.
that jump. What was the biggest, I guess, the hardest point of transition of making it from the deep south, even though Houston is metropolitan and it's city,
Mhm.
but it's a totally different culture and world than Paris.
It is. And so I have to explain this as well. So I did not go from Houston directly to Paris. I left Houston when I was 16 years old and I went to Philadelphia to study. I did my undergraduate work at Penn, the University of Pennsylvania, and I went straight from Penn undergrad into Penn vet school. And from Philadelphia, which was 8 years in this, that was really culture shock, at the beginning. Um, but I left Philadelphia after 8 years and I moved to Columbus, Ohio to do my graduate work in pathology. Then I moved back to Texas for a little while, studied for my board exam, and then the company that I was working for moved me out to the West Coast. So I was in the Bay Area for several years before I moved to Paris. Um, so I had a lot of experience in different parts of the country, different parts of the US before I left. And that was helpful
Hmm.
because every time you move to a different area of the country, it's a culture shock,
Mm.
you know. And so the fact that I moved from the United States to France was, I mean, that was definitely a culture shock, but I was used to the idea that I would have culture shock already. Um, and so it wasn't, I don't think that it was as hard for me as it might have been if I had gone directly from Houston.
Yeah. You know what? Like I said, I've been to Philadelphia myself a couple of times, and that in a little bit rougher environment than Paris. I mean, um, the biggest thing that I've always thought about when we got to Paris was just how laid back the environment was compared to the United
Mhm.
States. The environment is so carefree, and I'm just saying, for me, it felt a lot safer. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't know if that was just because I was in a place where I really wanted to be, or it's just nothing like it, and it's everything is, even the people, everything is a part of this scenery that is so rich. So it was like, it was almost like I could have stayed outside all day, you know,
Hmm.
and I didn't even really feel like I needed a place to stay except to go to sleep. That
Okay.
is not like that in the United States. It's always like you feel like you have to be somewhere. So
Hmm.
how did you get used to that? How did you, you know, kind of navigate that whole experience?
It took some time for sure. I did come here with gainful employment, so there was already going to be a structure.
Okay.
Um, and it took some time to, even though I came, I think, under the best of circumstances. So there were people who had my back. There were people who were looking out for me in terms of just getting myself established from a logistical standpoint. Um, there came a point when it was, I would say, after about 3 months of being here, where the honeymoon period was over.
Mm,
And it's just like, okay, this is really where I live, you know. I'm not going back in another 3 weeks. I'm
right,
here.
right,
And then you start to miss things about home. So one of the things that I did was I started looking for, um, I started craving food from home.
right,
And the food that I grew up eating, I'm from a Creole Louisiana family. And, you know, one would think that Creole Louisiana, with all the French influence, that I would be able to find things here. But I learned that the Creole food here is very different.
right,
I didn't know that there were all these different definitions of Creole and different types of Creole cuisine. Um, and I started looking for places where I could buy American food, American ingredients, so that I could recreate home. Food is one of the most powerful ways to recreate a sense of identity.
right, right.
And so I did that, and I ended up, long story short, writing a cookbook called Food for the Soul. A Texas expatriate nurtures her culinary roots in Paris. And going beyond that, I was eventually introduced to an organization which you mentioned in my introduction. It's called, in French, it's called l'Académie de la Culinaire du Monde Créole. And in English, what that means is the Academy of Culinary Art for the Creole World. And this organization is founded in Paris, and they are very much French Caribbean
Mhm.
and just francophone francophone
Yeah,
Creole. So anywhere in the world where people speak French, um, Black people
yeah,
speak French. They they have a Creole culture and they have Creole cuisine. And so this organization's purpose is to bring to light this Creole culture and this Creole cuisine. And they embraced me because Creole Louisiana is part of that, you know, and as Americans often do, we think we're the center of the world and we think that, you know, there's nothing else that's outside of what goes on here. And I was first shocked, but then thrilled to learn that Creole Louisiana cooking is only one little morsel
right,
of Creole cuisine around the world. And so I am the US delegate for this organization, and I bring Creole Louisiana influence and also Gullah Geechee
okay,
into this whole mix for them. So that's strange to them
right,
because, you
exactly.
know,
But you know,
yeah.
and that's the thing. I think that, you know, for somebody that dreams of going abroad, you
Hmm.
always need some kind of structure. You always need some kind of support system. I think one of the reasons that most, you know, especially African Americans, some of my friends don't
Hmm.
travel abroad is because they feel like the transition is so steep, uh,
Hmm.
to go from one environment to the next. And my uncle, you know, he was the first. We're from Louisiana, so we have a lot.
Okay. Okay.
We're from Opelousas, Louisiana, in between.
Oh, my mother is from Opelousas.
What? Okay. Oh my goodness. So you thought you got away from us, but we but one of the things that he left home when he was 16, the same age
Mhm,
that you talk. And so his thing was the adventure of it. And
mhm,
then uh, you know, I had grown up eating Creole food my whole life. So the thing was when we went French, it was the creme brulee, the desserts, and the cheese. And I was looking for that aspect of French life because it was like I wanted to taste something so different. But it really is something that African Americans, it's tragic to me sometimes that they'll say, "Man, I just can't dream of being overseas because I just don't know if I could, leave an American environment to transfer into an unknown, basically."
mhm, mhm.
There's to me, it was a lot easier than I thought because, I mean, in France, people are so geared to serve that when I went to a restaurant, where I want a Sprite, they would tell, I could just say that after, failing to speak French and telling them what I want, they would say, "Hold on, you want a lemonade?" Yeah, yeah.
Why not? Yes.
Yes, yeah. So they, I thought that the environment was a lot easier for me to acclimate to because it was like they really are geared towards service. But you're
Mhm.
saying it comes that point where you say, "Oh, this is reality if you really live there."
Yeah.
So once you got over that honeymoon period, what did you put in place as far as how am I going to live and what parts of your culture did you feel like you left behind being full time in Paris?
Um, well, for sure, even though I had studied French all my life, as I said, the spoken French was really a challenge. And it's very exhausting when you are navigating everything in your life that's new. Plus, you have the, we'll say, challenge of just being able to effectively communicate,
Mm,
being able to understand what people are saying, being able to respond in real time. Uh, it's a
okay.
hugely draining. And so, fortunately, again, because I was working for this company, they said, okay, we understand you need language, you need communication
Mm,
practice. So we're going to pay for you to have a tutor
mm,
so that you can just come up to speed with the spoken language. So that was critical.
mm,
Um, when you go to work and you work all day, I guess it depends on what you actually do in your job, but the work that I did at that time was actually fairly isolating. So
mm.
I was, even though I was going into a French speaking environment, I was spending 80% of my day alone.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I wasn't really, work was not the place where I was going to pick up French
Yeah, yeah.
because my work required me to be alone. Um, so that language tutoring that they provided me was essential.
Mm,
It was essential. And there comes a time when you just, after a while, you just find that, oh, it's just much easier. I don't even recognize that I'm not struggling
right.
anymore. And I would say that that took probably a good year. And that's even with all of the, all the information that I had in my head about the language. Just being comfortable speaking it, listening to it, being able to listen to the radio and not saying, "Oh, I only caught every fifth word."
Yeah.
Um, you know, it really it takes a while.
I mean, as far as you being in Paris, I mean, what was the biggest thing you missed about home? I mean, was it just your family, or was it just the day-to-day, did you ever feel lonely or, ever feel like you were missing something because you weren't in the United States?
Really, the only thing that I truly missed was the food. Um, and not just American food in general, but really, excuse me, um, traditional recipes that I grew up eating. So I'm Texan and Louisianan,
Mm.
and I missed barbecue. I missed good Texas chili. Um, I missed. I'm not a big seafood eater, so um, a lot of Creole food is based in seafood. But I wanted to have my chicken gumbo,
Yes.
and stuff like that, and just some good Southern biscuits
Wow.
and so I wanted to. That was my connection, truly, because I left home when I was 16. I wasn't really missing the family so much, that family interaction, because I had been gone from my home
Yeah.
for a long time before I came to Paris. But it was the food that really, I was just like, I could, and France and the French cuisine is just fantastic. And I gained so much weight when I first moved, because there were 7 bakeries within 5-minute walk from where I was living. And I was like, I'm sampling everything, and it was wonderful. But then the honeymoon was over, and I'm like, I don't care if I don't have a croissant. I want some biscuits.
Yeah.
I want I want some pancakes. And so then it balanced out after I was able to find the ingredients and just do that food. And it was a way of just reaching back and reconnecting. Not that I was ever disconnected, but just very strongly uh, pulling myself back into that home culture.
One thing about Paris is that for Black people in general, I've read books. I've read about everybody from Miles Davis to Langston Hughes to even Kanye West now. I mean, where it seems like Paris is just this society that is able to just embrace you without you having to. I mean, in the United States, for us, especially now, it is,
Hmm.
you almost feel like you're wearing your color each and every day, and it's
Hmm.
not something that is intentional. It's just something that is a reality. Uh,
Hmm.
in Paris, everybody that I've ever read about describes it almost as this colorblind society. Is that reality, or is that just hype, or is that just something we romanticize about?
I wouldn't say hype, but it's definitely not reality.
Mm,
There's a lot, and I've really, one of the major activities that I have been engaged in for the past, well, since 1999, however long that is studying the African American and the larger African diaspora presence in Paris. And it is not as simple as saying that France is colorblind. France would like to believe it's colorblind. That's part of its mantra, if you will, but it's definitely not true. And the interesting thing about it not being colorblind is that it is the way that Black people are treated here depends on where you come from, you personally, or your parents or your grandparents or your ancestors. So if you are African American, you will be treated very differently than if you are French Caribbean
mm.
or from the South Indian Ocean, or if you are from the continent of Africa. It depends completely upon France's history with the land of where you have immediately come from, or the land of your predecessors.
So it's a
And so,
relationship that country has had with your country, correct?
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And so, black is not black here.
Mm, okay. All right. And you know what? I think that, like I said, I know in my case, you know, when I read about Miles Davis and his transition to Paris, you know, I think he had just came off an incident where he was clubbed in the head by a police officer in New York City, and he went there
Mhm,
and he described the environment almost as if he didn't have to worry about that aspect there. You know,
mhm, mhm,
the police presence, which is in the United States is almost a military, you know,
mhm,
zone type of thing. But in Paris, I can't remember, you know, I would hear sirens every once in a while, but I never really felt a police presence, which I think in some
mhm.
cases was to their credit because you didn't feel like you know, you had that aspect there. But to hear you really talk about it is the reality that you have to understand where you come from in order to understand where you are now. So that being said, as a, you know, a black woman there, how
Mhm.
you know you're highly educated. How did you feel received? You know, as far as being there.
I I felt very well received. It depends on who's looking at
Mhm.
you, right? So you have a persona, you have a look, you have, you know, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you dress. I definitely dressed and still do um, the way that Americans dress. When I open my mouth, even if I'm speaking French, my accent is not a Parisian accent. It is an American accent. And so when people see me and then they hear me speak, they say, this is a woman from across the water.
Mm.
Okay. And she's American or she's Canadian. She is not, she's not French Caribbean. She is not from the continent.
Oh,
And therefore, I am treated a certain way.
mm.
Okay. And I will say that African Americans, if you want to sort of put it in terms of a hierarchy, we are treated the best
Wow.
of Black people in France.
Mm.
So if a French person ascertains that you are American, then you can expect to be treated well.
Amazing. You know, that is always not the case. But you know, like I said, as far as I've heard that before, that you know, in certain places, it really is an advantage to be an African American. Uh,
Mhm,
I just always have thought when when I heard people talk about it before I actually went there,
mhm,
there was this almost this mystique, you know, that you won't have to worry about racism. And the thing that I really enjoyed about it was the fact that I mean I could sit out, like I said, I sat at a cafe. People actually are so they don't seem like they are pressed for time because you can
right.
sit at a cafe for an hour. You can sit in a museum for almost 3 or 4 hours just talking about that same painting. And I watch people,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
that's what I really loved about it. I was like, this would be a great place to live if you didn't have to work. Because I mean, you didn't you you know you could just live. And so
Yeah.
you know, as far as coming back, how often do you come back to the United States, if ever?
I do come back. Before COVID, I was coming back at least once a year, sometimes twice. I have not been back since COVID.
Mm,
Um, and when I come back or when I go back, I always say, because I always go back home. I always go back to Houston to where my mother lives right now, the house that I mostly grew up in since the age of 8. And I always say, I'm going home. But when I get ready to go back to Paris, I also say, I am going home. And there is no conflict within me. making those statements. I would go to Houston, and then I would travel for the work that I did as a veterinary pathologist and toxicologist. And I would travel someplace in the US and I would say, okay, I'm traveling in the US, but I'm still home because I'm in the US.
Right.
Um, so I guess I'm one of those people, and probably one of the rare people who feels at home wherever they are.
Right.
I take my sense of home with me. Home is not really a place, it's a state of mind. And because I'm comfortable with myself, I take myself with me wherever I go. And so wherever I go, I'm home.
You know, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't want to come back after I went to Paris.
Mhm,
This was after years of, telling my children, I'm going to Paris, and I never went. And I went, and I just didn't. I never could forget that place. And
mhm,
I I know that you can grow up in a place and it could be what you know all your life.
mhm.
But then there are certain places that I don't say are better, but they occupy more of who you are or who you've grown,
Absolutely.
who you've evolved into being. And you
Mhm,
see yourself fitting in that place and almost being a misfit in the place that you came from. I don't know if that's something that is within all of us, but I know it was within me
mhm.
that as I've grown and as I was educated more, I just felt like this place is me more than that place is me. You
I I concur. I agree with that. There is an energy about Paris that um, is like no other, and I don't feel this way any place else on the planet, including Houston, which is where I grew up, and what I knew in all of my formative years and everything. I mean, I feel comfortable when I go there, but the core vibration
hmm
of me, it resonates in Paris.
right, right. And I think that's, you know what, if I didn't know you, I would think you would look out of place in Houston. If I I'm just I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to, you know, really paint it as something. It's just that you have that look that you fit there, and I wouldn't
Mhm.
think you would fit here because Houston has a different energy,
Yeah.
than a place like Paris.
For
Because
sure.
a place like Paris, it seems to fit some people like a glove. You can tell a tourist from a person that lives there.
Yes.
It's not this need to bring out a phone or post a selfie, like I was doing, and I had to catch myself. I'm like, I look like a tourist, and then once I was able to relax
Mhm.
and just, sit there and drink coffee, I
Mhm.
felt I felt what, just the Parisian side of myself just really, coming into play.
Mhm.
You can tell an American because they're always trying to move. They can't just,
Sit and relax.
no, and I felt like I almost felt like I was doing something illegal that I was able to sit at a park bench in front of the Eiffel Tower. I felt like somebody should have been charging me, or somebody should have, brought out a credit card machine and charged me for that privilege. But um, I just really enjoyed. It really surpassed all of my expectations. So the thing I would ask you, I know we have a limited amount of time, but the
Mhm.
thing I would ask you is this: is that if you were going to tell somebody something, or you were going to tell, African Americans something about coming to Paris,
Mhm.
what would be the most essential information you could offer them?
I think that I would say just be prepared to be open
Hmm.
to something different, something wonderful, to park all of those expectations of having to be moving around all the time and, checking off boxes. I haven't gotten to the Louvre yet, or I haven't seen the Eiffel Tower yet, or, just leave all of that behind and be,
Yeah. Yeah.
just be. And for a lot of Americans, that's very stressful.
It is.
It takes a while to just feel like it's okay not to be buzzing all
Mm,
the time. But once you allow yourself that privilege, you'll be surprised at how nice it feels and how much you'll want to come back to that again.
wow. Yeah, I think that's well said. I think that I went to all those places, but that park bench, with all those people, and I left my window open because I was looking. I hope the people. I know the people looking at me like I'm very weird because I just really sat there looking out this window of our hotel for almost an hour.
Okay.
I mean, I really was like, I know those people thought I was homeless because I sat outside all day long, and the thing about it is, the attractions didn't mean as much the longer I stayed.
Hmm.
The attractions mean more when you first get there. The longer you stay,
Hmm.
the environment really takes over. So it's like
Exactly.
it's really not a tourist city to me. It's like they have all these monuments in the Louvre, and there was these paintings that are bigger than some of the houses here in America. But I mean, I didn't feel like it's a tourist place. It's more of it's more of an experience. It's more
Yes.
of almost a different world. And so, I think that for people like yourself to introduce more African Americans to it, I think is really going to be a joy. And so I know that, are you still doing the tours now? I know that.
Yes, we are. Entree to Black Paris tours. We have 13, 14 actually, distinct walking tours about African diaspora
Mm,
history, culture, and contemporary life here. And we also do some gourmet walks. We
okay.
have less than a minute, so I don't know, but can I say the website?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, it's entreetoblackparis.com. Just go there and email me at paris@entreetoblackparis.com, and I'll be happy to talk with y'all.
Well, wonderful. I'm going to put this on YouTube as soon as we get off. I really enjoyed the conversation. Uh,
Thank you.
you are, I can't call you Estonian anymore. I think you're all Paris. Just the way you talk and the way you carry yourself. And like I said, I think that more African Americans need to see people like you and let them be introduced to that city by somebody like yourself. So I just want to thank you for giving me your time, Dr. Wells. And like I said,